How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Michael Thurville, photojournalist and sociologist here at VEDA World News. Now listen, we have a very special guest coming all the way from, I'm going to let her tell you. Ma'am, who are you?
My name is Alice Rothchild.
Okay.
And I'm a retired obstetrician gynecologist and a writer and a poet and a filmmaker.
Great.
And I am from Seattle.
All the way from Seattle. So hello to every viewer that's out there in Seattle that is actually watching this episode right now. So let's talk about you. What was that journey like? What was the inspiration that said to you, hey, I need to become a doctor?
That journey.
Yes, let's start there first.
Sorry about that journey. So I was a precocious little child who at 6 announced I was going to be a psychiatrist. I have no idea why.
Okay.
And then, I wrote papers on schizophrenia in 9th grade and majored in psychology in college.
Really?
And just like a little laser beam. And then I got to medical school, Boston University, and met my first psychiatrist. And unfortunately, this was on 1971.
Okay.
And unfortunately, this was a time when the psychiatry department was very strictly Freudian.
Yes.
So here I was, a budding feminist, learning about sexism in medicine and being my mind open to the issues of medicine in our country. And in my medical school class, I was there before the wave of women, so there weren't a whole lot of us. And a psychiatrist pointed the women out in the class and told us we were all there because of our unresolved penis envy. And that struck me as very not accurate to the situation. And I began to question a lot of things. We were told we were taking the place of a productive male. Our psychiatry textbook was unbearably sexist, and women were basically wives and mothers and didn't have much to do with the makings of the world. So I had a basic career.
Oh, we're fine. We're fine.
I had a basic career crisis in the middle of medical school. And then, when I would do pediatrics, I think, well, could I do that? And, cardiology, should I do that? And then I realized that when I was doing obstetrics and gynecology, that it was so backward and so oppressive to women that that's where I, as a feminist, needed to be. Okay. So I didn't go into the field because I loved an obstetrician gynecologist or I fell in love with surgery or anything like that. Mm-hmm. I basically went into the field to blow it up. And that was a different way than most people identify with a field. Okay. And then I did a residency at Beth Israel Hospital. It's a Harvard hospital in Boston. And there were 2 women 2 years ahead of me and a woman and I together in that year. And we were the first 4 women in the history of the universe to be in this residency program.
Wow.
And even though there were a lot of very nice, decent doctors, there was intense sexism in the practice of obstetrics and gynecology.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. When it comes to sexism, what do you think, or from your perspective, what is the root cause?
Well, I think the main thing is that medicine was a patriarchal movement. Okay. If you look at the history of obstetrics, midwifery and delivering babies was going on long before there were any doctors, because that's how the world happened. Yes, and medicine as a physician's specialty started to grow in the 1700s, 1800s, and that's when women were being accused of witchcraft for delivering babies. And doctors started thinking, these were all male doctors, white male doctors, that they knew how to practice medicine, and they were bleeding people and doing leeches and all sorts of horrific kinds of things.
And I only read about those things.
Yeah. And women were completely cut out of the field. Okay. And so it comes from a very patriarchal place. And the thing that was really tragic for women is that the midwives were still delivering the babies. And then as the doctors got a little more educated, but not in the scientific method, they said, we know how to deliver babies, and they basically ran the midwives out because the midwives were on their turf. So the women who had decades of experience and folklore that was passed down mother to child to daughter, grandmother, wise women, that kind of thing, got lost. And here were doctors who really had no clinical experience, no understanding of women, no understanding of the birth process, suddenly in charge. And it's a sort of political struggle, and they won. Okay. And so that's where the ideology is. Understood.
Now, you did speak to me yesterday, and you stated something about you're an activist.
Yes.
What are you an activist for and about?
So my activism started during the Vietnam War.
Okay.
And then when I got to medical school, it was around women's reproductive rights and health reform. I mean, we're the only advanced country that doesn't have universal health access, which is a crime. And then in the 1990s, I started thinking more about Israel-Palestine, because I grew up in a nice Jewish family, went to Hebrew school 3 days a week, had a bat mitzvah. I was a nice Jewish girl on track. And the more I learned about Israel and about things like colonialism and imperialism and racism, I started questioning all the things I'd learned in Hebrew school and the kinds of things I was taught by my parents. And I realized that there was a whole history of the region that I had never learned.
And what region was that?
The region of Israel-Palestine.
Okay.
And so with a group of other similarly questioning Jews, we started interviewing Palestinians in the Boston area, got a rapid education, started reading, and then started thinking, if the Jewish community knew the history of the Balfour Declaration and British imperialism and the way that Jews, settlers running from anti-Semitism in Europe, came to Palestine and basically tried to run out the Palestinians who were living there, claiming it was their biblical right to be there, all that kind of history. If they knew that history, the Jewish community would feel differently. Because I grew up in Israel, right or wrong. We loved Israel. It was a light unto the nations. And meanwhile, I learned that there was a Nakba, and 750,000 Palestinians were run out of their homes. This was like a total disconnect from the Israel I had learned.
Cognitive dissonance.
Right. So we started doing educational events in the Boston area, and we were very quickly blacklisted. And that was sort of like a...
Who blacklisted you?
The Jewish community, rabbis, the Israeli consulate. You don't know who made the phone call, but you had an event, and suddenly it's canceled. Or, you do the event, and people are there booing and hissing and videoing you and taking snippets from what you say and posting things on social media about what a self-hating Jew you are. I mean, we had that whole experience. So then we thought, this isn't working. Maybe we could look at this through the lens of healthcare and human rights, because a bunch of us were doctors. So we started a health and human rights project and started taking delegations over to Israel and the West Bank, and I've been to Gaza 4 times, and doing health work, interviewing health workers. Then, you'd go stay in a refugee camp, you'd meet regular old people, you talk to social workers, you really get a sense of the region. So my interest and my passion for this grew and grew and grew. And I got involved ultimately with Jewish Voice for Peace, which is a very fast-growing anti-Zionist, pro-BDS, pro-boycott, divestment, sanction
Let me ask
group.
you about make a prediction here. Because with the manufactured starvation of people in Palestine, in Gaza, and the West Bank, where do you see the malnutrition effects 10 or 15 years down the line?
Well, the thing that we know about famine and severe malnutrition is that it affects the whole development of a child.
Correct.
So it affects their cognitive development, it affects their physical development, they're more at risk for chronic illnesses later in life. So it's a whole lifetime of effect. And it also is passed on to the next generation. So famine and deep hunger and that kind of trauma and deprivation is a multi-generational trauma.
Okay.
And we know that from scientific studies.
What can be fixed as of right now? I know that it's a lot of geopolitical tension there. Hamas is there, Hezbollah is doing their thing in southern Lebanon, northern Israel. What can be done to help alleviate the struggles there?
So theoretically, last October there was a ceasefire called in Gaza, and so everybody's kind of forgotten about Gaza. But the problem is that there is no ceasefire.
Correct.
That there are about 700 people that have been killed since then. Hundreds and hundreds of people injured. Almost half the population still is very, very food insecure. Most people are getting 1 or 2 meals a day. There's a severe restriction in aid, and that got much worse when the war in Iran started. So the first thing that has to happen is that the bombing and the kidnappings and the injuries and the imprisoning people has to stop.
Well, I just read...
and the second thing is that then there has to be a massive influx of humanitarian aid, food, medicine, healthcare, education, the things that people are literally dying for, that has to come into the region, and it's very strictly kept out of the region.
Now, who is stopping the humanitarian aid?
The Israeli military and the Israeli government.
Because oftentimes pro-Israel people, they will say, hey, listen, it's Hezbollah. That
Well,
is
Hezbollah's in Lebanon, first of all.
I'm sorry, not Hezbollah, Hamas.
Yeah, that's not true. It's just if you read from reputable sources on the ground, and an analysis from groups like Al Jazeera and Mondoweiss and Electronic Intifada, it's not Hamas that's doing this. It's clearly the policies of the Israeli government. I mean, if you look at that crazy Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that was set up by our friend Mr. Trump. This was set up, and it was set up as a killing field. People going to get aid were treated like animals, and food was thrown at them, and people were just shot, point blank, trying to get aid. That was Israeli soldiers and groups that were hired, sort of mercenary troops that were hired internationally. But that's run by the Israeli government.
Is there any governing body in the world, like the UN, United Nations, that can come in and say, hey, listen, this has to stop?
The United States spends over $3.8 billion a year in military support to Israel, and they've spent multiple more billions during the last couple of years. So the U.S. could cut off all this military aid and it would stop. It's the United States that has facilitated this and paid for it and provided political cover, and so we are complicit and we have the power to stop it.
Understood.
But we don't have a government that wants to stop it.
Tell us about AIPAC. What are your thoughts on
AIPAC?
Yes, ma'am.
So I always say, so for people who don't know, AIPAC is a major lobbying group, lobbying for Israel, basically. I call it the Jewish NRA because it's so well-funded and so powerful.
It is.
And the big problems with AIPAC are that their policies are that they stand behind anything that happens in Israel, right or wrong, that they pour huge amounts of money into elections, and they've spent millions of dollars defeating progressive candidates in the Congress, and they are really determined to maintain a messaging in the United States that doesn't deviate from total support of Israel.
Understood.
And they're very powerful, and they're very well funded, and they own a lot of people in Congress. If you look at Congress people, you can see how much donations they get from AIPAC.
Should that even be allowed?
Personally, I don't think so, but I'm not in charge.
It's okay. I have to always ask people, because Jesse Ventura, who was an independent candidate in Minnesota, I believe, he actually won. He stated, hey, that political figures should wear a jacket that labels all of where they get their money from.
You can find it. You just have to do the research.
Okay.
I mean, I think the whole thing about Citizens United and the decision that there could be, corporations could give money to elections, and the whole thing kind of blew open. That was a terrible, terrible decision, and it totally has poisoned our elections because the little people don't have that kind of money. We have the votes, but we need to then, for us to accomplish something, we need money to go out there in the communities and work and get people to understand what's going on.
Final question on Israel. What are your thoughts on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and should he be removed from office?
So Benjamin Netanyahu is a corrupt, sort of evil person who has, every time he's been charged with a number of offenses, and every time his trial is about to start, he starts a war. I mean, he's done this fairly consistently.
Yes.
Or every time his political base is a little shaky, he starts a war. And in Israel, there's a parliamentary system, so the party that wins the election then has to coalition with smaller parties. And even though he's very far to the right, he's chosen to coalition either further and further to the right. So he's surrounded by people like Smotrich. And these guys are basic fascists. They're racists, they're fascists. If you look at their language about Gaza, they talked about another Nakba, another catastrophe like 48 to be done on Gaza. They talked about Palestinians as animals. These are not quality leadership. And he's aligned himself with those folks, and I think he probably agrees with them. I think he's very dangerous, and I think he should get convicted and go to jail.
Okay, because there was an international arrest warrant put out for him by the ICC.
So, but the problem with the International Criminal Court is it doesn't have any way to enforce its decisions.
Right, so it's essentially a pit bull with no teeth.
Yeah.
That's very unfortunate for a lot of people.
Right.
What else are you into?
So the other thing I do around Israel-Palestine is I work with a group called We Are Not Numbers.
Okay.
And this is a group that mentors young Gazan writers, 18 to 30, to basically write their story. Because one of the big problems we have in this country is that Palestinians in particular, Gazans in particular, and Arabs in general are totally demonized. I mean, if you said Palestinian, to most people they go terrorist. That would be the first thing they think
that's
of.
What they've always
because that's what they've heard.
Yeah.
So this this organization, which is Palestinian run, accepts pitches from young Gazan writers, and then I have a whole list of established, published English-speaking writers from all over the world, and I match the writer with the mentor, and the mentor then mentors the essay, and then it gets published on our website, wearenotnumbers.org, and it also, they often get picked up by other news outlets, by Washington Report, and not only are we just helping, it's sort of, I call this bibliotherapy, helping young writers to tell their story, because you actually feel better if you tell your story. But it also, we're training the future journalists in Gaza, and we're also training the future writers. So writers are now getting picked up by, you know, I mean, we had a writer who got published in the New Yorker. They're getting published by major media outlets. So it's very exciting.
I'm going to say that I really appreciate that, what you're doing. And I'm going to go forward in motion that VEDA would open its platform to any of your contributing writers.
Okay, I will get you in touch.
If they ever wanted to have anything published, VEDA will publish that censor-free.
Great, that would be great.
Yes, ma'am.
They certainly have a lot to say.
I think the world needs to hear what they have to say, you know.
And in the last 3 years, these writers have been writing out of tents. They've been writing essays on their smartphones.
Yeah.
You know, they're waiting to get internet connection at 3 o'clock in the morning, and some of them have been killed. They're sick. I mean, you know, the amount of trauma that they're living.
It is a catastrophe to kill journalists.
Right.
It's actually a war crime, is it not?
It is.
You know,
Yeah.
it's very
Israel has
senseless.
killed more journalists than any other country.
Yeah, it's over 200 and counting.
Right.
You know, I'm looking forward to the time where I can make that journey over to Gaza, Palestine, even Iran if I had to go ahead and write those stories, to get a first-hand glimpse of what's actually happened on the ground. So I just want to say thank you to those journalists that are out there.
Okay.
They're doing a fantastic job, and anything that VEDA can do to help, we're all in for that.
That's great. That's super.
Yes. What else you got?
What else do I got? So I just published a memoir, last year published a memoir called Inspired and Outraged, The Making of a Feminist Physician.
Okay.
So I've been talking a lot about my book. It's written in free verse, and it traces the first 45 years of my life.
Really?
And I wanted to explore, so people have been asking me to write a memoir for a long time, and I'm like, no. And then finally, when I saw like what was happening with Trump and with a pushback against all these struggles that I was involved with, for reproductive freedom and just respect for women and all the things that are important in that regard, I realized it was important to tell my story, because it's almost Forrest Gumpy. I hit a lot of very important moments.
Okay.
So I grew up in the 50s. Girls were supposed to be quiet and good and behave and be thin and be virgins when they get married, and that was the whole shtick. And then I went to college, and it was a very waspy college, and I was sort of stunned about things like class and race that I'd never thought about.
Really?
And suddenly I had to think about it, because I'd lived in a little white town, and then go to this college, and things became clear to me that I hadn't ever thought about.
Okay.
And then when I went to medical school, as I said, it was before the women started going to medical school. So my experience of sexism and patriarchy is very personal.
What would you say to the people who would take the position that people who fight for feminism, or not even really fight, but believe in feminism, hate men? What would you say to something like that?
I would say that that's pretty ignorant.
Okay. In what ways?
Women who fight for feminism are fighting for women to be treated as equal human beings, to have equal opportunity, to be respected in any position of power that they happen to reach, to get support from our culture and from our society, to choose to have children, choose not to have children. This doesn't really have to do with the relationship to men. Women who are being oppressed by men are offended by those men. But there are men that it is possible to love men and be a feminist. I mean, I've been married for 44 years now, so.
See, that's a long time. Some
and
people
we
can't
still
stay
love each
together
other, right?
44 hours.
Right. So I think it's a real it's a way to put it down.
Okay.
And it shows how threatened they are by the idea of a powerful woman.
Okay.
And I would say, you know, we can be powerful just like men can be powerful, only hopefully in a more sane fashion, because we don't have testosterone and a history of patriarchy. But it's a struggle that we were sort of moving in the right direction slowly, and now we're losing, and it really worries me. So it seemed to me that knowing the journey and knowing that you have to fight for everything would help other young people as well as older people understand that it's a constant struggle. You can't let your eyes get off the ball. You know, I mean, just like with abortion, we thought that we had that, even though we didn't, and it went away really quickly. And fortunately, we have ways to help women who don't want to continue pregnancies, but it's a struggle. It should be a human right that women have control over their bodies. That's
now,
basic.
I have to put a disclaimer there because we're actually sitting in the state of Texas. Texas is a state that has anti-abortion laws on the books. What would you say to Republican Governor Greg Abbott when it comes to this situation?
I would say to Republican Greg Abbott that women need to have control over their bodies in order to live their fullest lives.
Okay.
And so that means that women need to have control over reproduction, because if they don't control their reproduction and their choice to have a pregnancy or not, then they're not in control of their lives.
Understood.
And I think that that's just a basic, you know, autonomy is a basic form of freedom, and we need to have it. And also, you know, there's sort of a tradition of men not being responsible for the pregnancies that they might cause, and I think that men have been sort of left off the hook a lot, and so they should understand that this is a serious business, and women need to have the right to say yes or no.
Now, I've been in some rooms or some conversations. There's a lot of men that may give you some pushback on that. That is not my job to get into it here, but I do make that, you know, aware to you. Yes.
But how many guys, you know, oh, I hate condoms. Yeah, that's okay. Let's not. I'll pull out. You know, that whole scene. That's irresponsible. And I want every man to be responsible every time. Because women have to be responsible every time.
This is true.
So.
Okay. Now, before we wrap things up, could you give tips to any young women or men out there in terms of feminism or Gaza, Palestine, medical advice, if you choose to divulge that?
This is a big list.
I know, just anything, because, you know, people have all sorts of questions.
Yeah.
You know.
So, first of all, I don't think my work on Israel-Palestine and my work in obstetrics and gynecology is distinct from each other.
Okay.
I'm interested in human rights. I'm interested in people being treated with dignity, and I'm interested in countries being able to get along peaceably, and I'm interested in improving healthcare outcomes wherever they are. And I think young people need to think about their place in history. It's very easy to just kind of tune out and just cook along, but whatever happens does impact on you. So for instance, if the US is sending billions of dollars of weaponry somewhere, then that's not going to your education or to your health care or to all the other things that a civil society needs, you know? And if women don't have autonomy, then their lives are changed forever in a way that's not positive for their growth and development.
Understood.
So I think people need to pay attention, and if there's something that they think is important, they need to fight for it.
Understood. Where can people find you?
Well, I have a website, AliceRothchild.com. I also I've written 2 books for kids on Palestine, because there are not a whole lot of books that are quality books on Palestine, and they're on AliceRothchildBooks.com.
Okay.
My documentary, Voices Across the Divide, is on Vimeo. You know, I had it, you know, pushed it as a DVD for a while, and now it's on Vimeo. And I'm on social media, so people can find me.
What is your Instagram handle? Because you have so many people that are on Instagram.
Don't ask me this, because I hire someone to do my social media.
Okay.
Because they're only 24 hours a day, and I can't.
Trust me,
I produce the stuff
so
and then to get it out on social media. So.
All right. Well, whenever you get that, please text that over to me so I can go ahead and put it into the overlay below on the screen.
Okay.
Yes, man, that'll be greatly appreciated. I have to say, it was an absolute pleasure to be able to have this time to speak with you, to hear your insights, perspectives into not only just Gaza, but women's health, women's advancement within this particular society here in America, and just you as a person.
Well, thank you.
I just want to say thank you for all that you're doing. It really means a lot. not only to just VEDA, myself, but to just people all around the world, because people around the world are going to see this.
Good.
And I just want to say thank you.
Well, we are all one family, you know, and I think we
truly
need
are.
to remember that.
We do. Thank you for reminding us. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Michael Thurville, photojournalist and sociologist here at VEDA World News. It is an absolute pleasure to have spectacular guests such as this fabulous woman to my right, your left. I will see you on the next segment.
Take care.